If I ever write a memoir, it'll be called How to Fix Everything Except Your Marriage. That thought hit me as I lay under our kitchen sink at 11 p.m., wrestling with a pipe that had been dripping for weeks. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could engineer structural plans for 30-story buildings, but I couldn't figure out when my wife stopped loving me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Adrian Falk, and at 42, I thought I had life figured out. Structural planner by day, weekend warrior by night. Married to Janelle for 15 years, one daughter away at college, mortgage nearly paid off. The American dream, right? Except dreams have a way of turning into nightmares when you're not paying attention. The front door slammed upstairs. Janelle was home from another late meeting. These had become frequent over the past 3 months, so frequent that I'd started keeping mental notes. Tuesday night strategy sessions, Thursday client dinners, weekend emergency consultations. For someone who planned birthday parties and corporate retreats, she sure worked a lot of overtime. Adrian? Her voice carried that particular strain it got when she was tired. Or guilty. I was beginning to think it was the latter. Down here, I called, tightening the pipe joint. Just finishing up. Her heels clicked across the hardwood floor above me. Designer heels, I noticed. When had she started wearing designer anything to work? Janelle used to be practical about money, sensible about expenses. Lately, she'd been coming home with shopping bags from stores I couldn't pronounce, let alone afford on our combined salaries. I crawled out from under the sink, wiping my hands on an old towel. The kitchen was spotless, too spotless. Janelle had been cleaning obsessively lately, as if scrubbing away evidence of something. The house felt different when she was in it now, charged with an energy I couldn't identify. "How was the meeting?" I asked when she appeared in the doorway. She looked stunning, which was part of the problem. At 39, Janelle had always been beautiful, but recently she'd been glowing. A new haircut, subtle makeup changes, clothes that hugged her figure in ways that made me remember why I'd fallen for her in college. The cruel irony was that she'd never looked better, and she'd never felt more distant. "Long," she said, avoiding eye contact. Martin had some last-minute changes for the Henderson wedding. You know how demanding clients can be. Martin Kessler, her supervisor at premier events. I'd heard his name more in the past 3 months than in the previous 3 years combined. Martin thinks this, Martin suggests that, Martin wants to try a new approach. For a guy I'd never met, he sure had a lot of opinions about my wife's work. Must be nice having such a hands-on boss, I said, testing the waters. Something flickered across her face, guilt, maybe, or annoyance. He's very thorough, detail-oriented. It's actually refreshing to work with someone who cares about excellence. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Unlike you, she might as well have said. Unlike your boring, predictable, blue-collar approach to everything. "Well," I said, forcing a smile, "I'm just glad someone appreciates your talents." She nodded and headed upstairs, claiming she needed a shower. The shower that had become another new routine, long, elaborate affairs with expensive soaps and lotions I didn't remember buying. I listened to the water run as I cleaned up my tools, each minute stretching longer than it should have. That's when I saw it. On our nightstand, next to my reading glasses and the book I'd been struggling to finish for 2 months, sat a watch. Not just any watch, a Rolex Submariner, the kind that cost more than my truck. Heavy, masculine, definitely not mine. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. The back was engraved, MK. Time well spent, AK. Whoever AK was had expensive taste in gifts for MK Martin Kessler. The shower was still running upstairs. I had maybe 5 more minutes before Janelle came down. I photographed the watch from every angle with my phone, then carefully placed it back exactly where I'd found it. When she emerged 20 minutes later in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel, I was sitting on the bed reading. "Whose watch is that?" I asked casually, not looking up from my book. She glanced at the nightstand, and for just a moment, her face went completely blank. Then the explanation came, smooth and practiced. "Oh, that. One of my coworkers dropped it at the office today. I offered to return it to him tomorrow. You know how expensive those things are. Didn't want it sitting in the office overnight." "Thoughtful of you," I said. "Must be nice having coworkers who trust you with their Rolexes." "Martin's very trusting," she said, then caught herself. "I mean, yes, we all look out for each other at work." Martin. Of course, it was Martin's watch. The same Martin who required so many late meetings, so many emergency consultations, so much of my wife's time and attention. "I'm sure he'll appreciate getting it back," I said. She nodded and busied herself with her nighttime routine. Moisturizer, lip balm, the elaborate ritual that had replaced the simple wash and sleep approach of our early marriage. Everything about her had become more complicated lately, more time-consuming, more secretive. I watched her move around the bedroom, this woman I'd shared a life with for 15 years, and realized I was looking at a stranger. The Janelle I'd married wouldn't have brought another man's watch into our bedroom. She wouldn't have invented elaborate stories about returning lost property. She wouldn't have needed 45 minutes to shower off a day at the office. But this Janelle, this new, improved, glowing version of my wife, apparently did all of those things and more. As she settled into bed beside me, I made a decision. If Janelle wanted to play games, I could play too. But I'd always been better at strategy than she realized. Building structures taught you to think several steps ahead, to anticipate stress points and potential failures. My marriage was showing stress fractures, and it was time to do some structural analysis. The next morning, Janelle left early for work, taking the watch with her. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then made a phone call to my sister, Cassie. "I need a favor," I said when she answered. "What kind of favor?" Cassie had always been suspicious of Janelle, claimed she was too ambitious for her own good. I'd defended my wife for years, but now I wondered if Cassie had seen something I'd missed. The kind that might save my marriage, or end it. There was a long pause. "What do you need?" "A hidden camera. Something small, undetectable, and maybe some advice on how to use it." Another pause. "Adrian, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes it's better not to know." "I'm already going crazy not knowing. At least this way, I'll have facts instead of suspicions." "Okay," she said finally, "but promise me something. Whatever you find out, whatever you decide to do about it, think it through. Don't do anything stupid." "Stupid isn't the word I'd use for what I'm planning," I said. "Thorough, maybe, methodical, but not stupid." That afternoon, Cassie met me at a coffee shop downtown with a package that looked like it contained office supplies. Inside was a device no bigger than a thumb drive, along with detailed instructions for installation and monitoring. "Motion activated," she explained quietly. "Streams directly to an app on your phone. Battery lasts about a week. Just be careful, Adrian. Once you see something, you can't unsee it." I installed the camera that evening while Janelle was at another late meeting. Tucked it inside an old alarm clock on my side of the nightstand, angle adjusted to capture most of the bedroom. If my suspicions were wrong, I'd remove it and never mention it to anyone. If they were right, then Janelle had made her choice, and I'd make mine. The first few days of surveillance showed nothing unusual. Janelle came and went, according to her stated schedule. She slept on her side of the bed, got ready for work in the morning, lived the life of a busy but faithful wife. I started to think I was being paranoid, that maybe the watch really had been an innocent favor for a coworker. Maybe the late meetings were legitimate, maybe the distance I felt between us was just the natural evolution of a long marriage, not evidence of betrayal. Then came Thursday night. I was working a late shift at the office, reviewing structural plans for a new office complex downtown, the kind of tedious, detail-oriented work that paid the bills but didn't exactly set the world on fire. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the bedroom camera. Probably Janelle getting ready for bed, I thought. But something made me open the app anyway. The feed showed our bedroom, dimly lit by the lamp on Janelle's nightstand. She was there, but she wasn't alone. Martin Kessler stood next to our bed, and he looked exactly like what he was. A successful, arrogant corporate climber who was used to getting what he wanted. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of confident smile that probably charmed clients and impressed investors. The kind of man who wore $5,000 watches and expected other people's wives to return them personally. They were talking, but the camera didn't pick up audio. I didn't need to hear what they were saying. Their body language told the whole story. The way Janelle touched his arm, the way he pulled her close, the way they both laughed at some private joke. Probably about her boring husband who worked late and fixed leaky pipes and never suspected a thing. Then Martin said something that made Janelle throw her head back and laugh, and I caught a glimpse of the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. Animated, alive, completely present in a way she hadn't been with me in months. They moved toward the bed, our bed, the one we'd bought together when we moved into this house, the one where we'd made love and shared dreams and built what I'd thought was a life together. I closed the app. I sat in my empty office, surrounded by blueprints and structural calculations, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Anger would come later. This was something else, something methodical and calculating. The same feeling I got when I discovered a flaw in a building's foundation. The structure was compromised, and now I had to decide whether to repair it or tear it down. I drove home an hour later, giving them plenty of time to finish whatever they were doing and for Martin to leave. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Janelle's car was in the garage, positioned normally. No sign that anything unusual had happened. Inside, Janelle was asleep, or pretending to be. I went through my normal routine, brushing my teeth, changing clothes, settling into bed beside the woman who'd just been with another man in the same spot. She stirred as I got under the covers. "How was work?" she mumbled, the question automatic and meaningless. "Productive," I said. "Got a lot accomplished." And I had. In the span of one evening, I'd learned everything I needed to know about my marriage, my wife, and my future. The question now was what to do with that knowledge. Over the next week, I collected evidence with the same methodical approach I used for structural assessments. I documented times, dates, patterns. I discovered that Martin's visits coincided with my late shifts. Janelle had been tracking my schedule, planning around my absence. The footage showed them comfortable in our space, familiar with each other's routines. This wasn't a new development. They'd been doing this for months, maybe longer. Martin knew where we kept the wine glasses, knew which side of the bed Janelle preferred, knew exactly how to make himself at home in my house. I also started paying attention to other details I'd missed. Joint credit card statements showed charges I didn't recognize, expensive lunches, hotel rooms during business trips I hadn't known about, purchases from stores that didn't match Janelle's usual shopping patterns. Our savings account, which I'd been contributing to steadily for years, had been slowly depleting. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would trigger automatic alerts, but a consistent pattern of withdrawals that added up to thousands of dollars. Janelle hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd been funding the affair with our money, using our shared resources to wine and dine her lover, buying gifts and paying for hotel rooms where they could be together without the risk of using our bedroom. The watch had been a mistake, a moment of carelessness that revealed everything else. On Friday evening, Janelle announced another late meeting. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing my cheek with the same casual affection she'd shown me for years. "Martin wants to go over the Morrison account, and you know how thorough he likes to be." "I'm sure he does," I said. She paused at the door, something in my tone making her look back. "Is everything okay? You've seemed distant lately." The irony was breathtaking. She was asking me about being distant while planning to spend the evening with another man. "Just work stress," I said. "Nothing for you to worry about." She nodded and left, and I immediately called in sick for my evening shift. Then I settled in to watch the show. Martin arrived 20 minutes after Janelle got home. This time, I forced myself to watch the entire encounter. They were comfortable together, intimate in ways that spoke of genuine affection rather than just physical attraction. They talked and laughed, shared a bottle of wine from our kitchen, acted like a couple enjoying an evening at home, which, from their perspective, they were. When they moved to the bedroom, I kept watching. Not because I enjoyed it, every moment was like swallowing glass, but because I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a midlife crisis. Janelle was in love with Martin Kessler, and he was clearly in love with her. They were building a relationship in the ruins of my marriage, using my house as their private retreat, my money as their entertainment fund, my absence as their opportunity. The next morning, Janelle was unusually affectionate. She made breakfast, asked about my plans for the weekend, suggested we watch a movie together. Guilt, probably, or maybe just the glow of a woman who'd spent the evening with a man who made her feel alive. "You know," she said as we sat at the kitchen table, "I've been thinking we should take a vacation, just the two of us. It's been too long since we had time together." "That sounds nice," I said. "Where were you thinking?" "Maybe somewhere warm, Florida or the Caribbean, somewhere we can relax and reconnect." Reconnect. The word was almost funny. How do you reconnect with someone who's been systematically disconnecting from you for months? How do you rebuild intimacy with someone who's been sharing intimacy with another man? "I'll look into it," I said. She smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given me in weeks, and I realized she thought the vacation would fix everything. A week in paradise would somehow erase the months of deception, the lies, the fundamental betrayal of everything we'd built together. That's when I knew Janelle didn't just think I was boring and predictable. She thought I was stupid. That afternoon, while Janelle was at the grocery store, I made several phone calls. The first was to a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who'd gone through his own messy separation. The second was to a private investigator who specialized in marital cases. The third was to my bank, inquiring about separating our joint accounts. I wasn't ready to file for divorce, not yet, but I was ready to protect myself. to gather the resources and information I'd need when the time came to act. The attorney, Margaret Chen, was blunt and practical. "Do you want to save the marriage or end it?" she asked during our Monday consultation. "I want to understand my options," I said. "With documented evidence of adultery and financial impropriety, you'd be in a strong position for divorce proceedings. But if you're hoping to reconcile, confronting her with evidence might be the wake-up call she needs. And if it isn't, then at least you'll know where you stand." I thought about that conversation for the rest of the week. Did I want to save my marriage? The marriage I'd thought I had, based on trust and partnership and shared goals, was already over. Janelle had ended it months ago. I just hadn't gotten the memo. But maybe we could build something new. Maybe the shock of being caught would make her realize what she was throwing away. Maybe Martin Kessler was just a midlife crisis that would burn itself out if confronted directly. Or maybe I was still being stupid, still underestimating how far this had gone and how little my marriage meant to the woman I'd shared my life with. Friday night, Janelle announced another late meeting. This time, I was ready. "Another meeting with Martin?" I asked, not looking up from the newspaper I was pretending to read. "Yes," Janelle said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "The Patterson anniversary party is next weekend, and there are still details to finalize." She looked beautiful. Hair perfectly styled, makeup subtle but flawless, dress that probably cost more than I made in a week. All for Martin Kessler and another evening in our bedroom. "You know," I said casually, "I've been thinking I should meet this Martin guy. He seems to be such a big part of your life lately. Maybe we could have him over for dinner sometime?" Janelle's hand froze halfway to her earring. "Oh, I don't think that's necessary. He's very busy, and mixing work with personal life can get complicated." "I'm sure it can," I said, "but it might be nice to put a face to the name. I feel like I know him already, hearing about him so much." "Maybe sometime," she said, the words coming out too quickly. "I really need to go. Don't wait up." After she left, I poured myself a scotch and opened the app on my phone. Time to watch my wife with her lover one more time before I decided what to do about it. They arrived within minutes of each other, Martin letting himself in through the back door like he owned the place. The camera caught them embracing in the bedroom, and I could see them talking animatedly about something. Probably the Patterson anniversary party, I thought bitterly. Nothing like mixing business with pleasure. But then Martin pulled out his phone and showed Janelle something that made her laugh and shake her head. She said something back that made him grin and pull her closer. They looked like teenagers sharing secrets, conspirators in their own private joke. I was about to close the app when Martin said something that made Janelle's expression change. She pulled back, looked serious for a moment, then nodded slowly. Martin took her hands in his, and even without audio, I could tell this was an important conversation. Then Martin dropped to one knee. He pulled out a ring box, not just any ring box, but the kind that came from the jewelry store downtown, the one where I'd bought Janelle's engagement ring 15 years ago. The irony was so perfect, it was almost funny. Janelle covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. She nodded enthusiastically, and Martin slipped the ring onto her finger. Her right hand, since her left still wore my ring. They kissed, and I closed the app. So that's how it was going to be. Janelle wasn't just having an affair, she was planning a new life. The vacation she'd suggested wasn't about reconnecting with me. It was probably her way of easing into the conversation about wanting a divorce. A gentle letdown before she moved on to bigger and better things. Martin Kessler could offer her everything I couldn't, a more exciting career, a higher social status, the kind of lifestyle she'd apparently been craving. I was just the placeholder husband, the reliable provider who'd gotten her through her 20s and 30s until something better came along. I finished my scotch and made a decision. The next morning, Janelle was practically glowing. She hummed while making coffee, smiled at nothing, checked her phone constantly. The new ring was hidden away, but she kept touching her right hand unconsciously, probably feeling its weight. "You seem happy," I observed. "It's Saturday," she said brightly. "Beautiful day, no work stress. Why shouldn't I be happy?" "No reason at all." She came over and kissed my cheek, and I caught a whiff of expensive perfume, another recent addition to her routine. "What do you want to do today?" she asked. "We could drive up to the lake, take a walk, maybe have lunch somewhere nice." The lake house. We'd been talking about buying a place up there for years, something for weekends and eventual retirement. Another dream that would fade with our marriage. "Actually," I said, "I have some errands to run. Why don't you relax, maybe catch up with your friends?" "Are you sure? I feel like we haven't spent much time together lately." "I'm sure. You deserve a day to yourself." She looked almost relieved, and I wondered if she was planning to meet Martin, maybe show off her new ring, start making plans for their future together. My first stop was the private investigator's office. I handed over copies of everything I'd collected: photos, video files, financial records, documented timelines. He reviewed them with professional detachment. "This is solid evidence," he said. "More than enough for divorce proceedings. What's your next step?" "I want to know everything about Martin Kessler, his finances, his background, his marriage. If he's planning to leave his wife for mine, I want to understand what that looks like. And if he's not? Then my wife is in for an unpleasant surprise." The investigator promised results within a week. My next stop was the bank, where I opened a separate checking account and transferred half our savings. Not theft, just protecting assets that were legally mine. Then I drove to Janelle's office. Premier Events occupied the top floor of a renovated warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. Very trendy, very expensive. I'd been there exactly twice in the 5 years Janelle had worked there, once for a Christmas party, once to pick her up when her car was in the shop. The receptionist, a young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings, looked up when I entered. "Can I help you?" "I'm Adrian Falk, Janelle's husband. I wanted to surprise her, but I'm not sure if she's in today." "Oh, she's not here. She and Martin went to check out a venue for the Patterson party. They should be back Monday." "Martin Kessler?" "Yeah, her supervisor. They work really well together. Are you sure you don't want to leave a message?" "No message," I said. "I'll catch her at home." So much for Janelle's day of relaxation. She was with Martin, probably celebrating their engagement, making plans for their future. The lies were so automatic now that she probably didn't even think of them as lies anymore. I drove home and spent the afternoon researching divorce law, reading about asset division and alimony calculations. Massachusetts was an equitable distribution state, which meant marital property would be divided fairly, but not necessarily equally. With evidence of adultery and financial misconduct, I'd be in a strong position. But money wasn't really the point. The point was that Janelle had made a choice, and now I was going to make mine. She came home that evening with shopping bags and a story about spending the day with her college roommate who was visiting from Portland. The lies came so easily that I almost admired her skill. "How was your day?" she asked, unpacking what looked like expensive lingerie. "Productive," I said. "Got a lot accomplished." Sunday passed quietly. Janelle was distracted, constantly checking her phone, probably texting with Martin. I worked in the garage, organizing tools and thinking about the conversation we were going to have very soon. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and waited for Janelle to leave. Then I printed out everything: photos, bank statements, credit card records, a timeline of Martin's visits to our house. I arranged it all in a neat folder, the kind I use for presenting structural reports to clients. When Janelle came home that evening, I was waiting in the living room with the folder on the coffee table between us. "We need to talk," I said. She looked at the folder, and something in her face shifted. The color drained from her cheeks, but she tried to maintain her composure. "About what?" "About Martin Kessler. About the watch. About the fact that you've been bringing your lover into our bedroom for months." She sat down heavily, staring at the folder like it might explode. "Adrian, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. You've gotten very good at explaining things lately. But I don't want explanations. I want you to look at the evidence and tell me what you think we should do about it." I opened the folder and spread the contents across the table. Photos of Martin's car in our driveway, screenshots from the bedroom camera, bank statements highlighting unexplained withdrawals, credit card bills showing charges for hotels and restaurants I'd never been to. Janelle stared at it all, her hands shaking. "How long have you been watching me?" she whispered. "Long enough to understand that our marriage ended months ago, and you forgot to tell me." She started crying then. Not the gentle tears of remorse, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone whose carefully constructed lies had just collapsed around her. "I never meant for this to happen," she said. It developed naturally. Martin and I work so well together, and you and I have been growing apart for years." "Growing apart," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "We both know this marriage hasn't been working. We're like roommates, Adrian. We don't talk anymore. We don't share anything meaningful. When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my goals, what I wanted from life? When was the last time you told me the truth about anything?" She wiped her eyes, trying to regain some composure. "I should have been honest with you from the beginning. I should have asked for a divorce before things went this far. But you didn't. Instead, you decided to use our house as your love nest and our money to fund your affair. Instead, you let me play the fool while you and Martin laughed about your boring, predictable husband. We never laughed about you. Don't." My voice was sharper than I'd intended. "Don't insult my intelligence any more than you already have." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence of her betrayal spread across our coffee table. "What do you want me to say?" she finally asked. "I want you to tell me about the ring." Her right hand moved instinctively to cover her left, but it was too late. I'd seen the gesture, the unconscious protection of her secret. "What ring?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot from Friday night's video. Martin on one knee, ring box in hand, Janelle crying with joy. That ring. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, something had changed. The guilt was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Defiance, maybe, or relief that the charade was finally over. "Yes," she said quietly. "Martin proposed, and I said yes. While you're still married to me. While I'm married to someone I haven't been in love with for years." The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. "How long?" "How long what?" "How long since you loved me?" She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. "I don't know," she said finally. "It wasn't sudden. It was gradual, like watching a fire fade. One day I looked up and realized the warmth was gone. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning? Worth trying to fix?" How do you fix something like that? How do you make yourself feel something you don't feel anymore? You talk about it. You go to counseling. You try. Like you tried? Her voice was getting stronger now, more confident. "When was the last time you planned a surprise for me? When was the last time you asked me out on a date, or bought me flowers just because, or showed any interest in my work beyond asking how my day was? I was working, building a life for us, saving money, planning for the future. Your future, your idea of what our life should look like. You never asked me what I wanted. I asked you all the time. No, you asked me what I wanted for dinner, or what movie I wanted to watch, or where I wanted to go on vacation. You never asked me if I was happy. You never asked me if this was the life I dreamed of when I was 25. I stared at her. This woman I'd thought I knew completely, and realized she was right about one thing. I had no idea what she dreamed about, what she wanted from life beyond the comfortable routine we'd built together. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. "So you decided to find happiness with someone else's husband." "Martin is getting divorced. He filed papers last month." "How convenient. And when were you planning to file yours?" She looked down at her hands. "Soon. I wanted to find the right way to tell you." "The right way," I repeated. "After how many more months of lies? After how many more times bringing him into our bed? I know I handled this badly." "You think?" "But Adrian, we both know this marriage has been over for a long time. We're just going through the motions." Maybe she was right. Maybe we had been going through the motions, coasting on habit and history instead of building something real. Maybe I had been taking her for granted, assuming she'd always be there while I focused on work and practical concerns. But that still didn't justify the lies, the deception, the complete betrayal of everything we'd promised each other. "So what now?" I asked. I think we should get divorced. Amicably, if possible. We can split everything fairly, stay friends for Emma's sake." Emma. Our daughter. I'd been so focused on Janelle's betrayal that I hadn't thought about how this would affect her. She was in her sophomore year at college, building her own life, and now we were going to destroy the foundation she'd grown up on. "Have you thought about Emma?" "Of course I have. She's an adult, Adrian. She'll understand that sometimes people grow apart." "Will she understand that her mother was cheating on her father? That you were planning a new life while lying to everyone about it?" Janelle's face hardened. "I don't think we need to go into details with Emma, or with anyone else. These things happen. People will understand. You want to keep this quiet." "I want to handle this like adults. There's no need to hurt people unnecessarily." No need to face consequences, she meant. No need to deal with the social embarrassment of being known as the woman who cheated on her husband. Much easier to present it as a mutual decision, a mature recognition that they'd grown apart. "What about Martin's wife? Does she get to handle this like an adult too?" "Alyssa knows. Martin told her everything. They're working out the details amicably." "How civilized." "It doesn't have to be ugly, Adrian. We can do this with dignity." Dignity. She wanted to blow up our marriage and move on with her lover, but she wanted to do it with dignity. I looked at the evidence spread across our coffee table, months of lies, deception, financial betrayal, and felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. "You're right," I said finally. "There's no need for this to be ugly." She looked relieved, probably thinking I was going to make this easy for her. She was wrong. I spent the next week being the perfect, soon-to-be ex-husband. I agreed to mediation instead of litigation. I suggested we use the same attorney to keep costs down. I even helped Janelle start looking for apartments, claiming I wanted her to find something nice. She bought every bit of it. "I'm so glad we can handle this maturely," she said over dinner Tuesday night. "I was worried you would want to fight about everything." "What's the point?" I said. "We both want the same thing, to move on with our lives." She smiled, probably thinking about the life she was going to build with Martin Kessler. The successful executive and his beautiful wife, hosting dinner parties and taking exotic vacations, everything I'd never been able to give her. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the week gathering intelligence. The private investigator had been thorough. Martin Kessler wasn't quite the catch Janelle thought he was. His divorce from Melissa was far from amicable. She was fighting for everything, claiming adultery, and demanding forensic accounting of their assets. His position at Premier Events was less secure than he'd led Janelle to believe. The company was struggling financially, and there were rumors of layoffs. Most interesting of all, Martin had a history of workplace relationships. Janelle wasn't his first affair with a subordinate. He'd been quietly moved from his previous company after a harassment complaint, and there were whispers that Premier Events was reconsidering his employment. But I wasn't ready to share any of that information yet. First, I wanted to see how far Janelle would go with her deception. Thursday evening, she announced she was going out with friends from work. "Just drinks," she said. "We need to decompress after the Patterson party." The Patterson anniversary party that had supposedly required so much overtime and so many late meetings. I wondered if she'd tell Martin about our conversation, about the divorce we'd agreed to pursue. I wondered if they'd celebrate their freedom, make plans for their future together. I decided to find out. I followed her to a restaurant downtown, staying far enough back to avoid detection. She met Martin at a corner table, and they looked like any other couple enjoying an intimate dinner, holding hands across the table, sharing food, completely absorbed in each other. I took photos from across the street, then went home to wait. Janelle came back around 11, slightly flushed and obviously happy. "How were drinks with the girls?" I asked. "Fun?" she said. It was nice to relax after such a stressful week. "I'm sure it was." She kissed my cheek and went upstairs to shower. Another elaborate ritual that I now understood was about washing off Martin's cologne, removing evidence of their evening together. Friday morning, I made a phone call to Premier Events. "I'd like to speak with someone about Martin Kessler's employment," I told the HR representative. "Are you calling for a reference check?" "Something like that. I have some information about Mr. Kessler's workplace conduct that might be relevant to his continued employment." There was a pause. "Can you hold, please?" 5 minutes later, a different voice came on the line. Margaret Torres, Director of Human Resources. "Mr. Falk, I understand you have concerns about Martin Kessler. I have documented evidence that Mr. Kessler is having an inappropriate relationship with a direct report. I believe this violates your company's harassment and workplace conduct policies." Another pause. "Can you come in this afternoon? I think this is a conversation we should have in person." At 3 p.m., I sat in Margaret Torres's office with a manila folder containing selected evidence of Martin and Janelle's affair. Photos of them together, documentation of Martin's visits to my house during work hours, credit card records showing company expenses for personal activities. "This is very serious," Margaret said after reviewing everything. "If these allegations are substantiated, both employees would face disciplinary action up to and including termination." "I'm not looking to get anyone fired," I said. "I just think you should be aware of the situation. We'll need to conduct a formal investigation. Are you willing to provide sworn statements about this evidence?" "If necessary." "And you understand that if we determine policy violations have occurred, there will be consequences for both parties involved?" "I understand." What I understood was that Martin Kessler's career was about to become very complicated. Even if he didn't get fired immediately, he'd be under scrutiny, probably passed over for promotions, eventually managed out. The executive lifestyle he'd promised Janelle was about to evaporate. But I wasn't done yet. Saturday morning, while Janelle was at yoga, I drove to Martin's house. It was an impressive colonial in an expensive neighborhood, the kind of place that screamed success and stability, the kind of place Janelle probably imagined herself living. Alyssa Kessler answered the door. She was attractive in a sharp, professional way, with the kind of confidence that came from years of marriage to a successful man. She looked like someone who didn't suffer fools gladly. "Mrs. Kessler, I'm Adrian Falk. I think we need to talk." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "About my husband and your wife. You know? I've known for months. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" She invited me in, and we sat in her immaculate living room, drinking coffee and discussing our spouse's betrayal with the calm professionalism of two people negotiating a business deal. Martin thinks he's in love, Alyssa said. He's filed for divorce, planning to marry your wife as soon as both divorces are final. And how do you feel about that? I feel like my husband is a middle-aged fool who's about to learn some expensive lessons about reality. She was right. Martin was giving up a 20-year marriage, a beautiful home, and social connections that had taken decades to build, all for a woman who was herself married, herself in the middle of a messy life transition. I've been thinking about the financial implications, Alyssa continued. Martin's been very generous with his girlfriend. Expensive gifts, hotel rooms, restaurant bills, all traceable, all documented. That must be helpful in divorce proceedings. Very helpful, especially when combined with evidence of his previous workplace relationships. She knew about Martin's history. Of course she did. Alyssa Kessler struck me as the kind of woman who made it her business to know everything about the people in her life. What if I told you there might be professional consequences for Martin as well? I asked. I'd say that's unfortunate, but not surprising. Martin has always been reckless about mixing business with pleasure. We talked for another hour, sharing information and strategies. By the time I left, we had an understanding. Alyssa would handle the divorce proceedings with maximum prejudice, and I would ensure that Martin's professional life became equally complicated. Janelle would find herself engaged to an unemployed, divorced man with significant financial obligations and a reputation for workplace misconduct. Not quite the upgrade she'd been planning. Monday morning, I implemented the final phase of my plan. I sent copies of all my evidence to 3 people: Margaret Torres at Premier Events, Alyssa Kessler's divorce attorney, and Emma at college. The email to Emma was the hardest to write. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something about your mother and me. We're getting divorced, and I want you to understand why. This isn't about growing apart or falling out of love. This is about choices your mother made and consequences that can't be avoided. I've attached some information that explains the situation. I'm sorry you have to learn about this, but I won't let you think this divorce is about anything other than what it really is. Then I went to work and waited for the explosions to begin. The first call came at 10 a.m. Janelle crying hysterically. How could you do this? How could you send that to Emma? I sent Emma the truth, something she wasn't going to get from you. She didn't need to know the details. She needed to know that her mother is a liar and a cheat, and that's why her parents are getting divorced. Not because we grew apart, not because these things just happen, because you made a choice to betray our family. You're destroying everything. I'm not destroying anything, Janelle. I'm just refusing to help you cover up what you already destroyed. The second call came at noon. Margaret Torres. Mr. Falk, I wanted to let you know that we've completed our preliminary investigation. Both employees have been suspended pending a full review. I appreciate you taking this seriously. We take all workplace conduct violations seriously. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. The third call came at 2 p.m. Martin Kessler himself, furious and desperate. You snake, you've ruined everything. I haven't ruined anything, Martin. I've just stopped pretending I don't know what's been going on. Janelle loves me. We're going to be together no matter what you do. That's between you and Janelle, but you won't be together in my house, on my time, with my money. And from what I hear, you won't have much money of your own pretty soon. You don't know what you're talking about. I know your wife is taking you for everything you're worth. I know your job is in jeopardy. I know you've got a history of workplace relationships that's about to become very public. Other than that, you're right. I don't know anything. He hung up on me. That evening, Janelle came home looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her eyes were red from crying, her clothes wrinkled, her usual perfect composure completely shattered. They fired us, she said without preamble. Both of us. Martin's been blacklisted from the industry. His wife is taking everything, and Emma won't return my calls. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. This is what you wanted. She was right. This was exactly what I'd wanted. Not just divorce, not just separation, but complete and total consequences for the choices she'd made. What I wanted was a wife who didn't lie to me for months. What I wanted was a marriage based on honesty and respect. What I wanted was to not find another man's watch in my bedroom. So, you decided to destroy my life. I decided to stop protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. She stared at me with something approaching hatred. You're not the man I married. Neither are you the woman I married. The woman I married wouldn't have done any of this. The woman you married was young and stupid and thought love was enough. I know better now. Apparently you do. She went upstairs to pack, and I poured myself a scotch and sat in the living room where we'd had our first honest conversation in months. The house felt different already, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. An hour later, she came downstairs with 2 suitcases. I'm staying with my sister until I figure out what to do next. That's probably best. She paused at the door. You know this won't make you happy, right? Destroying my relationship with Martin, getting us fired, turning Emma against me, none of that will fix whatever was broken between us. You're right, I said, but it will make sure you understand that actions have consequences, and maybe the next man you marry won't have to learn that lesson the hard way. She left without another word. I finished my scotch and looked around the house we'd shared for 10 years. Tomorrow I'd start the process of making it mine again. New locks, new paint, new furniture to replace anything that reminded me of Janelle and Martin's visits. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Dad, I'm coming home this weekend. We need to talk. Another text, this one from Cassie. Heard through the grapevine that Janelle moved out? You okay? And finally, one from Alyssa Kessler. Martin signed the divorce papers today. Thank you for your assistance in this matter. I smiled and started planning my new life. 3 months later, I ran into Janelle at the grocery store. She looked tired, older, like someone who'd learned some hard lessons about the difference between fantasy and reality. Adrian, she said, clearly uncomfortable. Janelle, how are you doing? I'm managing, working at a small firm downtown, starting over. And Martin? Her expression tightened. Martin is also starting over, in a different city. So he'd run away when things got difficult. Probably found another job in another state. Maybe another married woman to pursue, leaving Janelle to deal with the wreckage of their great romance alone. I'm sorry it didn't work out, I said, and meant it. Are you? Really? I'm sorry you had to learn the hard way that some people aren't worth destroying your life for. She nodded slowly. Emma's talking to me again. That's something. She's a good kid. She'll forgive you eventually. Will you? I thought about that question. The anger was mostly gone now, replaced by something like pity. Janelle had given up a solid marriage, a comfortable life, and her relationship with our daughter for a man who'd abandoned her the moment things became inconvenient. I already have, I said. But that doesn't mean I'd trust you again. I understand. We parted ways in the parking lot, and I drove home to the house that was finally completely mine. I'd started dating again, carefully and slowly, building something new with a woman who valued honesty as much as I did. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago. Janelle got very little. Her actions had consequences in court just like everywhere else. I kept the house, most of the savings, and my self-respect. But the best part was the knowledge that I'd stood up for myself when it mattered. I hadn't been the understanding, accommodating husband who made things easy for his cheating wife. I'd been the man who demanded accountability and made sure betrayal came with a price. Janelle had called me boring and predictable for years. She was right about predictable. She should have predicted that actions have consequences and that even boring men have limits. She learned that lesson too late to save our marriage, but just in time to understand that some mistakes can't be undone with apologies and explanations. As I pulled into my driveway, I thought about the watch that had started it all. Such a small thing, really. A careless moment that revealed months of careful deception. But sometimes small things change everything. Sometimes a forgotten watch is exactly what you need to see the truth about your life. And sometimes the truth, however painful, is exactly what sets you free.